Hello, and welcome to Roll for Resilience, a podcast with the mission to explore how we can use role-playing games like D&D and Final Fantasy as tools to facilitate healing and personal growth. I am your host, Vector of Change. My pronouns are he, they. I'm a lifelong gamer and a licensed clinical social worker. On this episode of the podcast, we are discussing the importance of utilizing safety tools while playing tabletop RPGs in order to curate a culture of caring at the table. Join me and our special guests as we dive into the topic. Content warning, this episode does contain references to bullying and SI. Welcome to the stream, y'all.
Are we live?
Yay!
We're
We're
live.
there's the internet.
The whole internet is here.
They cannot hear you, though.
Hi, Ghost. Yeah. They can't hear me. Oh, boo.
This is the opposite of what I like. I would rather be heard and not seen.
Sometimes my Discord on the OBS doesn't link to the correct place.
Hold on, OBS having an issue?
Hold
all
on,
the time.
Discord having an issue?
What?
Never. That's
What?
never a thing that would happen.
All right.
Put the two of them together and watch them fight.
All right. So, y'all know me. I'm a Vector of Change. You can call me AOC. Pronouns are he, they. I am your host for this episode of our podcast. This is episode 2 of our first season of Roll for Resilience, and we're here to talk about safety tools in tabletop RPGs. So let's go around the room a little bit and introduce yourself. Let us know your name, what are your pronouns, and maybe just a little something about you to get us started. And we'll start at the top with Emmy.
Always me first. I love it. So obviously my name's Emmy. Here on Twitch I stream mostly JRPGs, spoopy games overall. Anything with a really good meaty story to it. I started playing Dungeons and Dragons probably towards the end of high school, and I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons with Effector for at least 15, 16 years. Effector, I think it's how long we've been playing together in various different groups. I've been with groups online, IRL, and I do tend to lean into a more chaotic neutral character type. I find myself just drawn to. But yeah, one of my, favorite things to do in my free time when I'm not being a workaholic is to play D&D. So, and it's been a great tool as far as helping me socially, because growing up I was not a very social person at all. Had a lot of social issues, couldn't talk in groups at all. And now there's this. It doesn't stop.
Excellent. Thank you, Emmy. And then I think next in the order is Lauren Urban, right?
Oh, hi. I don't know what the order is, so I will accept whatever you say because you're the dungeon master of this group. Hi, I'm Lauren Urban. I am my day job is I'm the content manager over at Idle Champions of the Forgotten Realms, which is a D&D thing. And then my night job and occasional weekend job is either playing the oboe and orchestras and or playing TTRPGs on stream or on podcasts and things. Mostly D&D, but occasionally other things. She, her. Most of my characters are a gambit of things. I'm trying to not play as many clerics, but I just play a lot of clerics. It happens. Even my bards tend to be clerics. My druid has kind of become a cleric. It all just happens. I guess I'm just a cleric at heart. You can find me over on the Codename Entertainment channel. I've got a website, lauren-urban.com, and you can see me playing on Children of Erte on Tuesdays on the Demiplane RPG channel with the amazing Deborah Ann Wall as our DM, and that's the druid who's slowly becoming a cleric.
It's a great show. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. And all right, we have 2 Laurens. Lauren, hello. Welcome in.
Yes. Hello. My name's Lauren Bryant Monk. I use she, her pronouns. I am the co-curator of the TTRPG Safety Toolkit. I am also a safety consultant and game designer. I haven't played D&D in literal years. But so but I have been playing a lot of Good Society, and much like other Lauren's characters always turning into clerics, my Good Society characters, no matter what role they're given, always become the cornerstone. regardless of whether or not I've chosen the cornerstone role. So
Sweet, sweet. And last but certainly not least, minimal gameplay. Hello.
Hello, my name's Maddie. I use they, them pronouns. I stream on the Twitch and I play mostly games that involve, get this, minimal gameplay. It's so funny. And I also play over on Perception Studio, which is a Dungeons and Dragons and other TTRPGs, part humans, part puppets. It's super fun and funny, and in general, play for comedy. And in the times that I play like serious games, it's a struggle. So I like to find everything from the like comedy side of D&D, which is super fun. I also run tech over there sometimes, and I have cats, and if they jump up here,
I also have cat.
Yes, excellent, spectacular.
Also have
He's in the
Spectacular.
net he made himself right now. He's like a little ball behind
The
the
more
wall.
cats, the better.
I was just say, bless you for being a producer. Anyone who runs tech is amazing in my book, because that's unsung heroes, especially in the TTRPG community. So thank you for running tech. Also, I will just say, you can just call me Obo, since we do have two Laurens, and I abdicate the Lauren to the other Lauren, because if we're talking about safety tools, you've got
Nice.
Lauren, who like literally wrote the book, and then Obo Lauren, who follows the book that other Lauren wrote.
I also have ADHD, and this will explain why I forgot to mention that, because you were all talking about characters. My characters, when I play, all have a tendency to turn into like surfer stoner dudes that like just chill and like talk like this and like do everything really slow. And like I don't know what it is. They just all turn into that.
I love it.
sometimes it's just easier to just, default to
To stoner
Yeah.
bro.
The default is always fun, and you can never really go wrong with it. Like,
That's
it's-
true.
I haven't had a chance to play a character in a while.
I know
pretty
you haven't.
sure maybe the character I played was last in your campaign, Sisava. But I typically go for a bard.
The Saba was fun. She was a
I
troll.
love a good bard. I love being on the side, having utility. Maybe not so great at the combat, but that's okay because I look good. That's important.
The Saba was the shit stir of that campaign.
Our topic today is about safety tools in TTRPG. And we kind of got a little bit into our experiences. It sounds like we have quite a range of people who've been playing D&D a lot, people who've not played D&D for a little while, right? So I think it's kind of cool to kind of hear different perspectives. So I guess let's start with Emmy. Emmy, what is the very first TTRPG system you engaged with when you played tabletop?
D&D 3.5. Sorry.
3.5?
Oh, I just
That's okay. So the first TTRPG system that you ever engaged with, and then what is a star? What is a highlight from a recent session you had where you were playing some type of tabletop?
like the main groups I have are the one with you on Wednesdays, and then the one off stream with the other group with I'm trying to think, because in my other group, because we've been doing like an oddball version of Vampire the Masquerade, our DM for that group, he tends to take other systems and kind of tweak them into his own set of rules, and his set of rules happen to be incredibly fun. It makes murder hoboing very fun for our group. Our group is a lot of chaotic people. We're very chaotic. We have somebody who's like the only good neutral person out of all of us, who are all chaos. Poor guy is stuck trying to wrangle us in all the time, and it just doesn't happen. And I recently became Vampire King of all of New York, so I'm very proud of myself after
Hey, Mazel Tov.
yeah,
Congratulations.
after freeing like this evangelical being that was like, I will grant you a wish, and I'm like, I want to be in charge. And so I became a vampire prince, and then became Vampire King. I have crowned myself Vampire King at this
That's
point.
right.
But we
Okay.
do have another person in our party where their stuff is more chaotic than mine, and it makes me laugh every time. Plunge 87 is this vampiric clown named Patches, and Patches, when he's talking, every other word is honk honk. Honk honk.
Oh, no, thank you.
So we get in a lot of trouble, and then there's another person who's like a vampire head of a motorcycle gang. It gets very interesting. And then in Effector's group, hitting level 5 is a big thing, and my character is someone who didn't want to come to school. She hates going to school, and now her and her roommates that she didn't really want to be bunked up with, she wanted her own room, are going on a big summer vacation. So there's pros to both groups. It's hard to pick one over the other.
Yeah, I definitely so for those who aren't aware, I do run an actual play campaign on my channel. It's called the Frog Pond Academy, where we have a bunch of hijinks. It's more of a slice of life campaign with a few mysteries and heists sprinkled within. Because to me, D&D, I feel in its core roots is a war game, right? That's where it comes from, from the 70s, and that doesn't have to be what we use it as. We can change that up, and so we have races to who's going to take a shower first in the bathroom, and like how are we going to deal with our roommate drama, and like we can play out all of these different scenarios through RP. And there's some combat thrown in. We fight giant frogs and mimics and whatever hijinks are on campus, but it's definitely something I love being able to flirt around with, is how do we take this system and break it and make it different. So knowing that you've had quite a bunch of different systems, you've played at different tables, you've had different DMs, you've been in different groups that I know of. What would you say is something that has made a difference for you in terms of being able to really just immerse and enjoy yourself compared to maybe that first time you were playing 3.5?
So the first version of 3.5 I played was led by my my brother, and it was all combat, 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 combat. I think you were there for that first session, maybe Effector, when we were doing that. Jeez, it was the first one where I was using Fate for the first time. With Mr. Smith as our DM. I think that's the best way to refer to him. Because I was trying to think of a name to use for him that's not his real name. But so the way Mr. Smith worked with this was my first time using the system ever, and a way to help me step into the system and understand how it's played and really learn my character that I'd created for myself is essentially, it's like that tutorial part of the video game where it's player 1 and I'm on my own little like 10-minute adventure of myself where I'm being put into the story. And that's what he used, like, as far as, my character at the time was known for getting in a lot of trouble. She'd start a lot of fights. She was part fae, and she would go invisible and steal shit. Like she was very chaotic. And he used like a one-on-one combat with somebody who I'd stolen some stuff from. It was kind of like the wrong person, kind of thing. I shouldn't have taken that, to kind of teach me how to tweak the system. And he's like, okay, what do you want to do? And that was the first time I'd ever been asked in a game, what do I as my character really want to do? And just that little guide there, the way he did that kind of restructured how I thought of D&D and how I played it. And that caused me to connect with each of my characters moving forward more. I don't know if you remember that campaign. I think you were you were some kind of alchemist, I think.
Was I in my Roy Mustang era?
Yes, it was the Roy Mustang. Yeah, that was the one before we were the Bledovics. And you were like the Russian prince banging Stalin on the side.
Yeah,
Sorry.
true. That was a campaign experience, wasn't it?
Sorry.
Similar question for you, Maddie. Like, what was the first TTRPG system you got into, and what's a highlight of something you enjoyed about a more recent one?
First would have been also 3.5. And some friends were playing, and they invited me, and someone was like, here, make a paladin. And I was like, cool. Because I played EverQuest 2 for a while, so I at least knew the base of what a paladin is supposed to kind of be like. So I was like, cool, thank you for picking something I've heard of. Awesome. And so that occurred, and it was never finished because, you know, groups of friends, that's kind of how it goes sometimes. Some awesome things recently. So one of the things at Perception Studio that we do is chat can tip to add characters or make like weird twists happen, or give like GM powers to one of the players for a minute, like it's like a timed minute. And there was one time where I was given GM powers, and we were at, naturally, I liked what you were saying about doing things other than battling. We were at an underground rave, obviously, as one does. And we, I was like, I stretched what the powers of a bard might be, and utilized some psychic future sight, and in a very quick period of time checked every different tunnel until I found the right one for us to actually be able to leave, because we were stuck at the underground rave again, obviously. And that was super fun. Something I like a lot is that we also play a lot of just like one page TTRPGs. Recently someone suggested a game called Everyone is John, or some like white boy name. It was like white boy name, right? Okay.
Yeah,
and I was
Everyone
like,
is John.
okay, and I said, really? Like, we're gonna all be like one part of this person's like brain, and we're deciding that like a guy from the Midwest is what we want to do? We should be a cat instead. And so we played it, Everyone is Mittens, where we were all a cat. And it was super fun, and we did things like jump toward like a window and like just generic cat things, which is awesome because one, cats, and two, I like being able to do things that aren't necessarily fighting. I don't love like fighting. I feel like such a focus on D&D in particular is because like the gameplay like mechanic is specifically created around battling, but when we use it in Everyone is Mittens, it becomes about, am I going to succeed at stopping myself from eating the food that I'm just going to throw up? Like, I couldn't, by the way. I failed the roll. Yeah.
Sounds lovely. And we had a lovely little foray into a 2-page tabletop system. We played Goblin with a Fat Ass. That was
Oh
a
gosh, that was fun.
wonderful experience.
At work, someone put together a game night for next month, and it's gonna be like normal games. But someone was like, we should play D&D, and I was like, in one night, like with people that have never played? Yeah, sure. So instead, I'm gonna run a game of Lasers and Feelings. I don't know if anyone's played Lasers and Feelings. It's super fun and simple, and you roll D6s to see if things happen, and it's just a good beginner system for
That sounds similar to Fate, where you used 4d6s and got bonus d6s, I think.
Fate.
I find anything with a d6 is nice and simple.
Pluses and minuses.
We're playing a game of Fate next month on Tuesday nights, and I just kind of figured out my character, but it's going to be based in like Greek mythology, like god, demigod kind of world, and I'm very excited about that because I usually play there like once a month for studio day, but doing like a weekly show for a minute will be really fun. Plus, Fate is a cool system.
It is. I have found like using it, it's really
It's
easy
super
to,
accessible
role play
too.
with it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, so we'll go to Obo since you've redacted your first name. Obo.
Redacted. It's gone. It's gone forever.
Lauren, how about you? What was your first TTRPG system, and what's a highlight from a recent game you enjoyed?
So I was thinking about this. Most of my experience when I was real young was either playing video game RPGs, or I had these kind of bespoke moments of like helping out with a game here and there. And the only one that when I was young, when I was in college, I went to college as a performance major, and the vast majority of the people in my dorm one year would get together on Saturday nights and take over the lounge, and they would play a Star Wars TTRPG. I don't remember which one. I don't know if I ever actually looked at the rule book or anything. Now, Saturday nights are they're a time in where I usually have concerts. They're a big concert night, and so my Saturdays were often I was up until about 11 doing a gig, and then I'd go grab food and go back to the dorm. And this group would have been playing for like 3 or 4 hours, and they would play until like 9 o'clock the next morning. Um, but a lot of them were my friends, and I like Star Wars. And so I would often go in with my food and just kind of sit in a corner and watch. And more than once, the person running the game, storyteller, whatever the system was, would be like, "Hey, can you just be this person for a moment? Can you just play this?" So I had a lot of fun playing a Star Wars system that I still to this day have no idea what I was doing or if I was doing it right, but it was fun. But my first real experience with tabletop was fourth edition. I was in the process of moving out to Seattle, and I had been listening to the Acquisitions Incorporated podcasts back in my day when they were just audio podcasts, and got real excited. And I'd always wanted to play D&D but never had the chance. And so when I got out to Seattle, one of the things I did was found a game that was happening at a store, because they would do I don't remember exactly what they called them, but it was like you showed up and everybody who showed up on one night would get split into groups and you go play D&D, and it was organized play.
Adventure League?
Adventure League, yes. And so that was kind of my first real experience with like, and I say real as in like I had a character sheet and I knew the rules. And that was a lot of fun. And that group played for years. Even after, unfortunately, the store closed, we all then just migrated to my apartment. I ran a campaign for them. They ran games for me. It was super fun. And yeah, since then, just been playing a lot, either my own home games or just gotten into this whole streaming thing and a little bit of podcasting. I do play mostly D&D, and what I do love about the system is the flexibility of it, like you all have been talking about. And like I also kind of enjoy that you can lean into one of the different pillars of it. So like I do enjoy combat, but I kind of want the combat and the exploration and the role play to all be a nice balance point. But if you ask me what my favorite moments are, which was your other question of like what's a recent favorite moment, they're all not just role playing, but specifically character interaction. Whether it's player DM, whatever it is, an actual character interaction that has consequences, I guess would be the way to put it. Like
Consequences are fun.
consequences are fun. Yes. But like not just idle chatter, but like talking about something that's going on in those characters' lives, having good meaty conversations. And that's kind of that's where all of the joy really comes out for me, is in those moments, or when I'm a DM, when I can facilitate those moments happening, because I feel like when the characters get a chance to really interact and have things that they want to talk about with the other characters, that's a sign that everybody's having fun and it's a good story. Because that's just my jam. And I did have that moment very recently. Children of Verte has been doing pre-recorded shows. Spoiler alert, which is not really spoiler. And so we recorded an episode recently, which as of this moment hasn't aired yet. So when it happens, if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, Lauren, was that the moment you were talking about? You can come to me. But I had this amazing conversation, my character with Alicia Marie's character, on Children of Verte, that was I don't know how long it was. You know, you get into those kind of intense moments and it feels like it took 5 seconds and then someone's like, "Oh yeah, the two of you were talking for 20 minutes." So I don't remember exactly how long it was, but it was a really beautiful moment of these two characters kind of reconciling everything that had happened to them and the potential of the future and a kind of battling with a question that the both of them knew they were going to have to answer for themselves. And it felt real, it just felt real good. Even though not everything about the conversation was happy, some of it was sad, some of it was angry, some of it was being scared of something that was going to probably happen. But that kind of like connection with another person, even if it's two characters that we're playing at that moment, is just so special that that's why I keep coming back to any tables, whether it's D&D or some other system.
Yeah, I think that it's a unique platform, a TTRPG, where you could embody the headspace of another person. Maybe they're not human, but whatever, another person, and just really feel that and connect with another person's character that they've created. It's a whole new world, compared to what we can sometimes do. I attended PAX Unplugged in 22 and got to go to all sorts of cute little panels and hear people talk about things. That's when I first really learned about safety tools and like what people are using them for. And I was so touched. Most of the people that were sitting in those panels wanting to curate a healthy, positive role play experience were librarians, because that's where our queer kids are going. They're going to the library and they're playing D&D, and that's how they're being able to explore things and, in an environment that feels safe and supportive. And so these dedicated librarians are like, we need to learn this. We got to figure this out because of our teens. Let's go. Um,
That's
but
awesome.
it does speak to what this genre can do, what potential it has. On the other side, we also have to think about what dangers does that create, if we're not careful. Um, Thank you for sharing that little moment with us.
Thank you. And I definitely, once everybody's gone around the horn, I can speak a lot to like times in my life that I wish I had more official safety tools to fall back on, that, knowing what I know now about how I would have handled other situations or had more tools. So,
And Lauren, can you share with us one of your first TTRPG systems and, something you enjoyed of a more recent time?
Yeah, I mean, Lauren's story actually made me rethink what my first TTRPG was also, because I would have said 3.5. That was the first one official TTRPG I played. Oddly enough, in the attic of my church as an official youth group event, not usually the association with religion that people have with D&D. But sometimes people are cool. um but actually, if I really think about it, I was maybe a few years before that, I was at summer camp, and it was like the last day of summer camp, and like the camp friends you have that you just like sort of hang out with. And he had seen somebody play Dungeons and Dragons, I guess, in his life, and decided he wanted to make his own version of it, the way that you do when you're a kid. So he brought like 3 different board games and like pieced them together and like walked us through a little story. So I think that's technically my first TTRPG. Was this kid just, trying to make a game out of 3 board games he had.
Did he include Pretty Princess? Because I think that was actually everyone's
Pretty
first
princesses, yes.
TTRPG. Yeah.
No, I don't think he did. But
Okay.
I don't think I've even ever played Pretty Princess.
I asked for it for years
no.
for Christmas and never got it, and I was disappointed every year as a kid.
Nightmare.
The first real of published game. It's because the other game was real, it just wasn't published. The first published game I played was 3.5. It didn't really take off for me. I enjoyed it, but I just never really got into it until probably right after I finished my master's degree, and I got into Adventurers League in the basement of a comic book store, um, and you know, went on from there. But something that I really loved that happened in a game recently, and now I have to admit it's been a while since I've been very busy, so it's been a while since I've had some time to get in a good game, but I play on I feel a little bit like the obnoxious indie kid in this circle cuz just cuz it's been so long since I played D&D, but I've been playing a lot of Good Society is can be GM'd, but mostly I play it my friends and I we play it GMless. And one of the things that I love about GMless games in particular, and the and yeah, GMless. Bleh, sorry. One thing I love about GMless games in particular is that you can all sort of work together to come up with a story, and sometimes it's really weird and goes places you can never imagine, but like the sort of writer's room style talk of like, okay, how do we go from here to there? And how do we make that happen? And when you get a good group of people who are all really invested in like um just trying to figure out, especially near the end of a campaign, like how to land the plane of your story all together is really fun and something that I always find really rewarding.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a unique journey. I've often thought as I've reflected back on my notes from my sessions, I'm like, I would have never written the plot this way, and here we are, because we've got all the other human beings that are working with me. As you know, I'm the GM, but it's our story. We're telling it together, and it's their characters, and they're just reacting as they would. It's
Or
always
you set up like a huge story and the
always
characters just go right around it, don't even interact.
yeah. Or
Yep.
like a random detail that you didn't think was a thing, suddenly they fixate on, and so now that becomes now a focal point of the campaign.
Mhm. Mhm.
A
I
good
didn't know I
time.
was being called out here on this show, but here I am. Yep, I've been on both sides of that. Whoops, I've become fixated on this thing, and then find out later that wasn't supposed to be a thing, and then also been the GM where my players got fixated on a thing, and I'm like, well, I can either just make this work, or I'm making it work because it's group storytelling, and they really like this gnome, so here we go.
Everybody likes a gnome.
Yeah, one particular element
Mhm.
that went off the rails is someone wanted me to come up with books that they're finding in the library, and so
Oh god.
you do the thing where you find fantasy novel titles, and now we have a whole collection of fantasy smut in our world that takes you to other planes and causes all sorts of mayhem, all because they thought that was interesting. I'm like, okay, we'll go with it.
Mhm.
God, there's so many campaigns where that's happened. I want to say with your Game of Thrones one years ago. I'm pretty sure
Oh,
there were a couple. Sorry, we went way off the rails.
yeah, you did.
I
That
remember a specific thing that turned into a whole literal shit throwing fiesta
Mhm,
or fight or
mhm,
whatever.
mhm. As one
Yep.
does in Westeros. I guess we'll circle up to Lauren Urban. You were talking about some stuff that was coming up for you that you're resonating with about your TTRPG experience. Um, where you were like, man, if only I had a tool or multiple tools, this could have changed this experience for me. Can you share a little more about what you were thinking there?
So back in my fourth edition days, um, the group of us we rotated DMs, and session zero to me, like I don't think that term had been coined yet, but the idea of like okay, we're all going to get together and have pizza and make characters and decide on what we're going to do for a campaign was kind of a thing. And so it's a weird bookended story, beginning of the campaign, end of the campaign. Beginning of the campaign, because of an idle comment that I had made when I was a player, I found myself running a game for evil characters, an entire party of evil characters. And so unintentionally, we ended up having what I would now consider to be like a safety tools talk-ish, mostly about like, okay, here's our parameters for evil. Here are things that we're just not going to do no matter how evil. Here's things that I'm not going to ask you all to do, that kind of thing. And at the time, I don't think I had thought to do that for all campaigns. This was mostly like, oh, we're running evil, so we should probably be careful. Lawful evil and blah, blah, blah. Go through the campaign. And we're literally at the end. They're about to go walking through the door into the room where the BBEG was. And there was an encounter that was supposed to just kind of be a warm up, maybe burn a little bit of resource encounter, and also give them some hints about what was going to be in that big final room. And we had no money. There's no minis. There's no nothing. But I printed out little, basically on paper, just like the monsters I was using, and then tape them to a D6. And that's the monsters I was using. So we get into this antechamber, and I pull out the creatures, and they were giant spiders. I start putting the giant spiders down. And immediately, like 3 of my players, like, nope, 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 nope. And it took me a hot second to realize it wasn't the fun nope. It wasn't the, oh no, nope. No, this is serious nope. These are people who are just absolutely about to leave the table nope. And it took me a longer, I look back on it now and I'm kind of embarrassed how long it took for me to like rejigger and fix things at the time, because like I hadn't really realized that kind of thing, despite the fact that we'd even talked at the beginning and essentially had that lines and veils about evil, but it never had occurred to me to go through anything that might be in the campaign. It was the first time I dropped giant spiders, and 3 of my players literally like got up from the table. And so real quick, it was just like, they're not giant spiders, they're giant bunnies. Sure, bunnies. I just started taking the paper off, and we kind of reset everything, and then they just became bunnies and things were better. But like that's the moment that I think back on when the safety tools discussions became something that was prevalent, and learning how to think about those kind of things from the beginning as like, oh, if I had those in this moment, especially like I should have thought about that, considering we even thought about it at the beginning of the campaign. We knew enough to be like, these are evil characters, so we have to have some boundaries to keep these characters together. And that, I wish I just expanded that to be like the entire world of D&D, and why hadn't I? And so now it's a lot easier both to avoid things like the giant spiders and just not worry about that, because we've had that talk at the beginning. And then if something comes up in the middle of a game that's unexpected, I now have the tools to deal with it in a much quicker way and not fumble through turning spiders into bunnies. But yeah, that's the moment I think of whenever people are just like, but I don't know if the safety tools are really necessary. And I'm like, let me tell you about my all evil campaign that were afraid of spiders. Let's go.
Well, I'm sure there's a specific group of Monty Python fans that would be afraid of the bunnies equally as the spiders.
I think that rabbit from the movie is probably what came to mind in my panic to like fix things but not ruin the game, to basically, in terms we would now use, several people hit a line that I didn't know about, and I responded eventually in the way that was necessary, by just removing and replacing and then making sure everybody was okay. But yeah, at the time it was panic inducing.
Mhm.
It's like I didn't want my friends to be upset.
Yeah, it's I'm sure Lauren, you can speak more about this as well, given, your deep experiences doing consulting on safety. But as a psychotherapist, we're all about informed consent, right? Like, from the beginning, somebody even looks at my website to the point where they're walking out the door for the last time. We are constantly thinking about what's going on there. How are we doing things? I've had consultations with my mentor about my website in particular. So I do what's called EMDR therapy. So I do a lot of work with complex trauma, PTSD, managing things, helping people work through that. And so when I first drafted my website and I presented it to her, she was like, "No, you need to change this." Like, why? What's wrong with it? She's like, "It's too much exposure. You're putting way too much that is going to trigger somebody. Not everybody, but at least one person's going to read this copy, and no, that's not great. That's not great." And so I, with her help, definitely reconstructed my website. um, and there's a lot of practices that I've developed and continue to tinker in my practice to make sure that I'm doing what I can to practice informed consent. um, but I think it's the same thing here when we're talking about a role play, whether it's a one shot or a long campaign, right? We want to be able to establish a sense of informed consent with each other in the group. Lauren, would you mind sharing a little bit about maybe where the beginnings of the toolkit started?
Yeah. So my first exposure to safety tools was watching somebody do a Monster Hearts 2 actual play. Um and I remember talking to somebody who was a friend of mine who was in it, and going like, I don't think I could do this. Like, how are you managing this? And um they were able to explain, basically they didn't call it lines and veils because those are just words that we use, but talking about hard and soft nose,
Hmm.
and just uh that sort of opened the idea for me, and from there I started learning about other things. I started learning about the history. I started sort of collecting my own little Google Drive of resources, as I learned about more safety tools. And the the way the toolkit itself was sort of born was actually because my co-curator and I, Kiana, were doing a panel at my local gaming convention. And we had been told that there was going to be AV, but then there wasn't going to be AV. And so we wanted to have some sort of uh some sort of like thing to give people to explain what's going on. And Kiana at the time had made a one-page safety tool explainer for actual play. um and we decided then that we could tweak that, their explainer, add it to my Google Drive of tools, so that we could have handouts and links for this panel. And then also we knew it was going to be useful for a lot of people, so we released it to everything else. But it really just came from a desire to collect things that I had been seeing kind of going on, thrown around. uh the thing about the tabletop space and about it being so online, um is that a lot of things kind of, the internet is very ephemeral, right? So lines and veils is from my knowledge, the oldest like official safety tool that we're using in the form that it was made. It's about 20 years old. And it came from the Forge and it was developed by Ron Edwards, but the Forge is gone. For anybody who doesn't know, the Forge was a forum for game designers and people who liked role-playing games. But it was a forum, and forums are dead now. And so, well, they're not dead, but so all of this stuff, we were trying to do internet archaeology. Or when Google Plus shut down, there was a huge section of people who played and talked about TTRPGs on Google Plus and had all of this stuff on Google Plus. And when Google Plus finally shut down, there was a big desire to kind of keep and collect and preserve things that were going away. And so we started really looking at the toolkit as a way to, first of all, have everything in one place so that people didn't have to do all of the Googling themselves, didn't have to, try and find things, but also so that we could contribute to the preservation of things that may or may not, be there. And I don't know, maybe one day Google Drive will shut down and I'll have to find some other place to put it. But for now,
Let's hope Google Drive doesn't shut down anytime soon.
No, you just made a pit in my stomach.
I'm
It's like
sorry.
all of my notes. Oh no.
I know. But well, this is the thing. This is why curation is important, is that so that we always have things. And that's why we have a website now. So there's other ways to share the same information. But yeah, it was a thing that I was interested in and wanted to talk about, and needed to find an easy way to share it around with people. And Kiana and I are both really grateful that it's resonated with so many people and that so many people use it. I see on your chat that you use Bbars's full deck method, which is really cool because that's one that not a lot of people sort of know or use, but I think is really neat. I'm just a nerd who likes to talk about this.
Yeah, well, I'm a nerd who also loves to talk about this stuff. Hence the email and the invite to have you come on.
And I'm a nerd that's grateful that you put in the work to talk about this
Yeah,
stuff.
I have a lot of friends on the Twitch world who stream and do their things, but tabletop for a lot of them is new or unfamiliar territory, or it seems shiny, but I'm scared. And I think like being able to break down a little bit of like, you don't have to be scared. Like there are ways that we can have a safe experience and figure this out together. And
Looking at a blank character sheet for the first time, I will not lie, has always been terrifying, and I think it's intimidating to new players.
and I want to commend like the work that you were both doing to curate and keep this out there. I'm seeing other developers are now starting to build that stuff right into their things. I have a copy of Thirsty Sword Lesbians. Have you guys seen Thirsty Sword Lesbians? And there's like an anti-bigotry page right in the front of the book. There's stuff in here about some safety right at the beginning, safety and consent. There's a whole segment right before you get into the game. And so just knowing that, you know, people are hearing, about these things and wanting to implement that right in the core of their system, I think is fantastic.
Leave it to the queer people to put that first.
I can think of many different campaigns I've been a part of where having the safety tools like the safety tool deck, or even just like Effector before we did Frog Pond Academy, he had us do a survey, where having something like that in place, I think would have made the game very enjoyable, because some of those games wound up in the end turning extremely bad. And being able to like have had a safety tool at the time for those, looking back on them, would have been very beneficial, and I think would have made it so the group would have likely stayed together, I think, if everybody had that kind of open communication.
And I don't know if
Yeah.
I would have ever played any type of horror RPG if it wasn't for the fact that that kind of thing exists. And it is starting to get baked in even in there. I did it was a 6-episode show based on the Midnight World, which is a newer thing, Call of Cthulhu without the Cthulhu. And definitely has a lot of things right into the game that the two game designers, it was intentional. Like these are characters that you're going to play. They're going to deal with issues like PTSD. They're going to deal with this. And so there's a whole section right at the front of the book that's not just here's a whole bunch of safety tools so that you all know about the things that you are okay with dealing with and things you're not, but like here's also how to approach some of these topics in a respectful manner. Here's ways that you can avoid the tropes that come up with things like being scared or frightened or having PTSD. And it's the kind of thing in where it's important for any game, but especially in a horror game where it can feel like, well, but you've signed up for a horror game. Of course, you're supposed to get horrified. And it's like, no, I signed up for a haunted house. I that's what I want, but I want to be able to walk out the other side and be okay. And so I don't know if I ever would have even trusted trying some of those if it wasn't for the fact that by the time I got a chance to play Vampire and got a chance to play Midnight World and Call of Cthulhu and all of those, safety tools had become a thing that was just a standard.
Horror games are really interesting from a sort of and often where safety tools come up with about as much frequency as like a game like Monster Hearts, where there's like something sexual or a sexual or romantic element. But horror games in particular are very interesting to me because you are playing both to scare the character, like to make the character feel scared, but also to make you, the player, feel scared. So if you're playing like, a D&D, something might happen that, is very scary to a character, or causes a strong reaction like anger or something to the character you're playing, and you can role play that, but you might not actually be angry yourself. Or it's less likely to be angry yourself. But with horror, the goal is to scare you, the player. Like there's this meta layer of fear on top of the character layer of fear. And this is where we get into the idea of bleed. Like horror games are meant to have this sort of like bleed out of feeling from the game into the real life. And so it makes a lot of sense that horror games, and I think, I mean, I'm not a huge into horror games, but I wouldn't be surprised if horror games were writing in safety tools, or what we would now call safety tools, mechanics and even just reminders in rule books long before some of the other tabletop games, where just because you are supposed to, you the player are also supposed to be scared, and you have to embody the fear in a way that you don't necessarily have to do in tabletop.
Yeah, I think the system that I use that really produced that like IRL feeling of like what your character should be feeling is called Dread. I don't know if anyone
gosh, that one.
Dread.
Oh yeah.
See, I have not figured out how to replicate it online, but in person, you have a Jenga tower. And if you want to do something, you just do it. But if you want to do something that requires some challenge, you have to pull from the tower. And so it starts out very, you're just a bunch of friends playing Jenga, no big deal. But as that tower begins to get wonky, if that tower falls, you're gone. And so it just
Jenga is
naturally
an
builds.
absolute panic attack waiting to happen. I hate that game.
It's very effective at doing that.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
one time I played it, a factor was the DM for it. It was like our Halloween thing, I think, that year. And I remember like just shaking the whole time at like the last bit of the game, trying to like get this piece onto the top. I knocked it over and I wound up being consumed by a whole bunch of these creepy dolls. I recall correctly.
I think so.
But had I made one choice different that wouldn't have made me pull, I would have survived. But I was definitely at that moment feeling what my character was feeling, and of course, using the Jenga tower to play to as a way to tell that story is, it's you're physically being affected by the feelings that your character is feeling, and so it does challenge you a bit. Like Mr. Smith, who is a part of that group, he was able to stay level the whole time, except for at one point, I think he just like knocked the tower over, if I recall correctly, and let
Heroic
himself
death.
die.
Yeah.
Yep. He went with a heroic death,
Mhm.
whereas I was like, no, I can survive.
I was gonna say that reminds me of another. It's not as much horror as it is almost like dread. 10 Candles is another really good example of that, and definitely has baked into it safety tools, if only because when you are signing up for the game, you're signing up for your character to be dead by the end of it, and for everybody to essentially fail. You're signing up for the end of the world, and even knowing that, and knowing that like the purpose of this is not to the winning is not in the saving the world. The winning is in telling this intense emotional story of your character and the group that you're with. And it can be really emotional, despite the fact that you know from the beginning that this character is not going to survive the night. And despite the fact that you get to those points where you're like, oh, this is it. This is my chance to do the thing, and I'm probably gonna have to, blow out a candle at this point. And just the way the game holds everything together and builds that kind of tension is phenomenal. And yeah, it's you end up doing a lot of crying, even though it's like, but none of this was real. And also, I knew it was going to be a tragedy from the beginning, but it doesn't matter because those emotions are super real.
I really like 10 Candles. It's like my favorite way of broaching character death. I'm not a big fan of character death in a lot of games, but 10 Candles, you're basically like you're consenting to die by playing the game in the same way that like in Dread you're consenting to play Jenga, so if that's a problem, so Maddie probably won't play Dread because Maddie doesn't like Jenga.
I won't be playing any of these horror games. Just throwing that out there.
Listen, that's fair. And to be
yeah.
honest, as much as I've been playing a lot more in the last couple of years, I really find, for me personally, it's short. I don't think I could play like weeks and weeks and weeks of a whole campaign. Really, it's like, here we go. I'm going to do an episode. I'm going to do like 6 sessions. I'm going to do a very contained kind of thing because it's my jam in very small increments. And I think it's because of that buildup of emotions.
Yeah.
We played a game called Magical Kitties Save the World. That was pretty scary.
Oh, that's a good one.
Oh, so good.
But it sounds magical.
Yeah. Well, it is. But we met who's the lady that boils the 2 kids into food? Come on.
The witch from Hansel and Gretel?
That's the one. No, we met her. So it was very terrifying.
Ooh.
Maybe not as scary as Jenga, but
No, that sounds pretty scary enough. I would rather not be boiled into soup, thank you.
Okay. Yes.
It is interesting to me that the Wretched and Alone games use a Jenga tower also, I believe. There are a bunch of solo games, but the other big Jenga game that I know is Starcrossed, actually, which is a 2-player game. It's a 2-player romance game about 2 people who really want to but really can't is the pitch. And so the way you play is you have this Jenga tower, and every time you make an action, you have to do a pull. And every time you talk, you're supposed to touch the tower while you're talking, and then take the tower off. And the tower represents your resolve to not act on your feelings. So as soon as the tower falls, you have to act on your feelings. And it's a great it's a great way to experience the tension of attraction and forbidden attraction, and basically you are the longer you keep the tower going, the more successful your relationship is going to end up. The better a chance it is of being not just a moment of
The
passion.
slower the burn, the better the fire.
Yeah, basically. It's very good. They just recently Alex Roberts just finished crowdfunding sort of like not really second edition, but just extra stuff. Love Letters is what it's called. But anyway, Starcrossed.
There's a gay love letters.
Yeah.
I have that one. Anything gay,
Anything?
send it to me. Unless it's horror.
Yeah, I mean,
Hmm.
Starcrossed is pretty gay to begin with. I feel
I
like,
mean,
but
you can make anything gay if you try hard enough.
it's true.
You know,
And sometimes you don't have to try very hard.
it's funny to think about that because whenever I've thought about sitting at a table where there was like no safety tools or any mindfulness of that, and then the tables where like it's like baked right into everything you do, it's usually been a queer table or a not queer table for me.
It's the gays.
Oh, it's just personal anecdote.
No, I've had that experience as well.
Also, and I say this as an old, younger people are more likely to be not just conversant and on board, but expectant. Like they've now essentially grown up with the idea of safety tools as part of a TTRPG, even in basic forms, even in just real simple, the X and O, and here we go. But yeah, it's newer people into TTRPGs are learning the stuff that I wish I had known about when I got into TTRPGs, and it's great.
Yeah. And this is one of the things is like, that stuff was probably around when you first got in, but it was just harder to find, and it was such a boon that we
Yeah.
have the internet in which we can disseminate and learn this information, because a lot of these safety tools, like we talked about the Lines of Veils that came from a forum, but things like the X card by John Stavropoulos came out of convention play. So if you didn't get a chance to go to a convention where they were using the X card, maybe you did, and you didn't bring that X card back to your comic shop basement, then you don't get to know about it. So it's really, it's really cool that we are able to spread this information in the way that we are. I feel like there is also, especially in queer communities and marginalized communities, there's just a better sense of the importance of boundaries, because the way I describe safety tools to people who have never heard of them or maybe a little bit unsure as to why you need them is that you're basically setting up boundaries before the game, and then enforcing boundaries after like during the game. So like with Lauren's example about the spiders, that was a boundary that those players set. They said, I don't like spiders, and I'm not going to continue to play the game if we have these spiders. And Lauren was good enough to like see that was happening and said, okay, I'm going to respect that and change it so that we can still all have a good time. And I think in people like I find people with more privilege are often less like they're less likely to have their boundaries transgressed, or they're less likely to be talking about boundaries or just accepting that boundaries will be transgressed. I think this is definitely a thing with people who are femme or women in spaces where they're just sort of used to not saying anything when their boundaries are stepped over. because that's the way that they were socialized. And you know, when you have a history of tabletop, which is like these old white men who are, like Gary Gygax was famously a combative GM who really felt like he was fighting against his players, then you are just going to you're going to want to step on toes by design. And as players, we have decided that that's not what we want anymore, or if we want it, we want it in very specific situations, and in very specific ways. uh and also we just like hang out with larpers now, because
Yeah.
a lot of these tools originated in LARP because it when you're embodying the character, you need those protections a lot
Yeah, because somebody can
more.
get hurt. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that, like what in tabletop, I think in the 4th edition rule book they would call like the actor stance. Or yeah, the 4th edition Dungeon Master's Guide, which has a great page on player styles that I still refer to. But that wasn't always the case, and that wasn't the expectation for a lot of times, especially if we're talking about games that come from a D&D lineage, because they come from a war game lineage, which comes from playing on battles that already happened. We already know, how they're going to end necessarily. We already have our feelings all sorted out. So it's been really great to see as a society we've become more emotionally intelligent, and more used to talking about it. And I think queerness is definitely like a great vector, because when you reject, the gendered notions of how we're supposed to deal with strong emotions or things happening to us, um, then it opens up so much more space for discussion.
So, a comment I want to make about we were talking about the experience of bleed, where the experiences of your character are felt by the human being, the player, right? Bleed also happens the other way, where your personal experience can be infused in your character. I can't think of a single tabletop character I created that wasn't trying to deal with something that I'm trying to work through myself. I just don't always tell people. I've used tabletop characters to play around with gender. I've used tabletop characters to work on mommy issues. I've used tabletop characters to deal with my physical looks, right? And like my insecurities around that. And the character becomes a vector to be able to play out these different roles and these different things. And I think we need to be able to honor that element of it as well and create as comfy as a space as we can so that people aren't hurt in, I guess it's not a physical, there's nobody throwing any fireballs at you, but hurt in the other sense, where that really affects you.
And I think not just intentional putting something into a character that I'm trying out, but I've also had the experience of not realizing that my character was doing something that I needed to work out until all of a sudden it was either pointed out to me or I realized it's like, oh, yeah, that is a thing that I'm dealing with right now, isn't it? And so those safety tools mean that if that happens, I'm less likely to be upset when it happens because I've been having I've been having an experience that I know that I'm inherently going to enjoy, even when I have those weird realizations. TTRPGs aren't therapy, but they have those moments of being therapeutic. So yeah,
There is therapeutic tabletop out there.
oh yeah,
Just say it.
I am, but I'm not a therapist.
Yeah.
But
And
yeah,
I think it's important, that, and I'm not saying any of y'all are doing this, but I do think it's important that we talk about, because people do talk about tabletop as therapy, is that unless you are doing tabletop with your therapist, that should not be your intention.
Yeah.
And as much as I've like I think every queer tabletop player has like used a tabletop character to explore queerness. Like I feel like that's just one of the universal experiences of being queer and liking tabletop games. Um but you know, I think it's important to realize, and this is why it's great, because you can just stop. You can just decide, hey, this is too much for me, or hey, this is getting too real, or hey, I don't like those pronouns after all, so I would rather we don't use them for this character. You can just change it and it's all fine. Like it's all um it's all not uh you know, it's all not real. Maddie has
I think there's something also to be said about something I like what you guys are all talking about. Like I get absolutely, and I think that's the norm, but I feel that often I purposely do it different. I also have a very different queer experience than anyone that I've ever met, in that I was super young and I was just like, it never occurred to me that that it was something that people might not like. And then I never told anyone, and my mom one day was just like, hey, I think you're dating that Amanda girl, and I was like, what? Haha. And like never talked about it, like nothing ever. It's just always been like completely natural in my life, which has been great. But it's not something I've had to work through, because it always just made sense to me. There was nothing that I needed to like work through. But something that I do, rather opposite, I kind of like playing really like straight white, like privileged men.
interesting.
I made a character I named him Cash, and the S was a money sign. Like,
Oh no.
yeah, like that's because you know what? It's something I'm never going to experience. There's nothing I could do in the world to ever experience being a cisgender straight white male. Like, that's just impossible for me. And they certainly have an experience that I don't know, like, cool, like, and I can just do stuff and no one questions anything, and I'm just like, yo, my butler's here, gotta go, you know, and everyone's like, oh, cool, your butler, neat, you know, and then like the butler's in on the crime. That was for like a Clue themed D&D one shot, which was super fun. But I try to play queer characters, and like I said, they all become like just stoners. I don't know. I'm just maybe I'm trying to like be less gay in the world because it's not something I've experienced.
I mean, that makes me think of this character I had in the campaign I ran where I don't know if you know the Bulba Boy. Bulba played as like essentially his IRL uncle. He spelled it. The name was Gareg, Garegg. Gareg.
Isn't that how it's spelled?
Gareg.
Yeah.
Gareg was
Gareg.
he was homophobic, racist. He was everything in, you know, those old misogynistic white men we love to hate. And he used that as a way, I think, to work through the issues with this person that he was mimicking.
Sure.
And then eventually we had a character come in who was a person of color, and there was like this moment of where this shaman essentially helped Gareg work through his issues of racism and homophobia, and he wound up making love with this gorgeous, beautiful, big booby black goddess, and she is moon goddess, and she was like became the love of his life. So the way his story ended up is Gareg was a misogynist, racist, homophobic bastard no longer. He realized the error of his ways, and it was a really great way that Holden and the other person worked through it. And
that's also playing out like a fantasy world that like we know isn't gonna happen.
Yeah.
The people like online that we, you know, try to say, hey, you're wrong and here's why, and we know they're not ever gonna, like, nothing we say is gonna change their mind.
Yeah,
But
French's heart grew 3 sizes this day, and it's like, yes, yes, I want that game because that doesn't happen. Oh.
yeah, it was a beautiful moment, and I think I was dying the whole time they were acting it out. Because unfortunately, they did act out the.
super quick, how do you spell homophobia-ism? Is it like it sounds?
I would think so.
Okay. Homophobia-ism. So like IAI at the end
Yeah.
there. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah,
I
that
think
was it was a highlight for me in that campaign overall, was seeing something like that happen.
yeah, I wanted to draw your attention to and it's something I've been meaning to put in the toolkit, but Janaya Kemper, who is a LARP scholar and game designer, has done a lot of work on a concept they call emancipatory bleed. And that is sort of like, and there's many ways to approach it, you know, with the bleed in or the bleed out, but it is sometimes to experience um more restrictive situations, um often on and Janaya's work talks a lot about like vectors of marginalization, um uh to sort of like feel a sense of emancipation either after the game is over, to sort of be like, okay, I'm glad the world isn't like this anymore, or to feel empowered in you know, to have that bleed out of like feeling empowered in character, and then having those feelings of empowerment coming on. So yeah, I'll put the spelling of the name in chat, but it's very fascinating work. um and I know I have a lot of friends who, you know, for example, like to really explore historical queerness in games, uh because they find that helpful to sort of you know, experience, you know, what it was like to be a lesbian in the Victorian era when it was really difficult, and see these, you know, these women working it out despite, you know, everything going on. But I think there is also something to be said about like, I have also played, you know, a straight white man who can just do whatever they want without having to worry about it. And it's kind of nice.
Did he have a butler?
No, it was a D&D it was a revenge character, because, you know, I played in the basement with a bunch of um straight white dudes who would play female characters, and I'd be the only, you know, femme person at the table, and I was not impressed with their portrayal of women, and the characters that they chose to play. So I invented a guy named Guy McMahon,
I love it.
and he was a human fighter, and he wanted to do what was manly at all times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was Gareg. Sometimes he had to do the manly man thing. It was great.
Yeah.
Just gonna say, it's weird gendered stereotypes. When I was in grad school, we had to do a lot of role plays, like constant role plays all the time of demonstrating different therapeutic methods and principles and whatnot. And some people would just get really silly. I'll use the word silly. With their portrayals of these characters, because obviously they're not playing themselves. When you're doing family therapy, they have like roles that they're supposed to play. And so I messed with everyone's heads one semester, and I decided that the role play, what we're going to do, I'm going to choose to not give any pronouns. I'm not going to choose any name that has a gendered component to it. I'm just going to hand them a neutral character, and let's see. And it was the most organic role play that we had in all of my grad school career, because some people just get these weird notions of like these ideas. It's strange. It's strange. So sometimes it's fun to have a little power fantasy.
Have any of you seen or heard of the play She Kills Monsters?
Yes.
No.
So, it's about a girl whose sister dies, and she finds her sister's like journal about her Dungeons and Dragons campaign she and her friends have been doing, and decides to join the and play, and she learns about her sister through this, and like her sister's gay, we find out, and it was that definitely reminded me of that, in that like it's a really cool portrayal of somebody who's like totally like a normal, quote unquote, whatever, society decided that means, person crossing over into the like literally so super queer and nerdy weird D&D world, and then actually like learning and growing, much like Greg did.
I was lucky enough to get a chance to see that
Mhm.
play happen 5-6 years ago, long enough
Nice.
now that time is a flat circle. And what I especially loved about that is it's not just the device that gets this sister into the group, but like they then play act out on the
Mhm.
stage. Like here's the D&D session that they're going through, and they're being their own characters and everything.
And here's the characters in their sexy outfits.
Yep.
Yep.
And so like
Yep.
it includes a lot of that kind of tropism, and then you cry at the end. But it's a really
People
cool.
with souls probably cried at the end, yes.
Well, I at least did a lot of crying. I can say that, but it's a really cool show, and
It's good.
I think it's something that people could watch not knowing anything about Dungeons and Dragons. Like, I think probably a fair number of people who went, especially in the area that I am, that's geeky central, were people who were familiar with Dungeons and Dragons. But because the main character doesn't know anything about the game, the audience learns along with her, and so this really cool show.
Yeah, I'm just looking up for it. Apparently during the pandemic, the playwright wrote a version for like digital spaces so
Yep.
that people could do it like
That's
online.
cool.
Oh,
That's
that's so cool.
awesome.
I have to go buy a script now and read it. So-
One of the tools that I like to use at the end of all of our actual play sessions, I really like to use the stars and wishes, right? To kind of naturally and organically build feedback into our culture. And I think you were talking, Lauren, about the concept of like a emancipatory bleed or something like that.
Mhm.
Um,
Yes.
and so to me, I think a tool like that gives the ability to be like, okay, all right, that was my character, right? I am now like me, I'm AOC. Like, this is like, okay, this is like a transition back into the real life. Um, it was interesting. I utilized this with my last panel. So we had some folks on, some advocates for Palestine, and talking about the conflict, and we looked at history. And so like we ended up together after stream for like another hour and a half, just like doing that process, because it was so charged, it was so much going on, that I don't know, I find that to be just ritualistically so useful for myself. And I think maybe, I mean, you can speak to your experience as a player, how vitally important that has been, just building our little culture to keep us going.
It's been a new tool with Frog Pond Academy, having the stars and wishes and having the safety tool deck, and honestly, like having those stars and wishes after game to be able to talk about, okay, what happened? Do you want to see next time? That kind of thing. Mr. Smith has always done after game, okay, what direction do you guys want to go in next? But I have had a DM where they don't use any of that. At one point in time, they kind of, I think, got sick of my chaotic neutral characters I tended to play, and they handed me a character to play, and they said, no, I want you to play this. And they gave me a lawful good monk who was mute.
That's the absolute most
That's
horrendous
terrible.
character
I'm
I've
really
ever heard of. Yeah.
I'm really sorry you had to go through that.
Are
Uh,
you okay?
Effector was a part of this group at one point in time, and this DM specifically, he was, as you said, D&D used to be like a DM versus players thing. This individual is a very combative with their players kind of DM,
Mhm.
and this was one of the last times I ever had them as a DM. I had them one time after that, and I'm like, nope. I tried to go back, nope.
Some people should just not be allowed to GM. Like,
Like,
honestly,
and
that's
their reasoning for giving me that character was, oh, you play the same thing every time. It's not really that fun. For me, it's fun. For me, it
who
immerses me in
cares? It's
this.
a fucking game.
But I remember texting and calling Effector like during the game, texting him and then calling him about it after, because there was some IRL drama also going along with it, and so Effector was the one who said, I think they're also punishing you for this. Um,
Mhm.
I'm
Yeah,
not
I think
having
and
safety tools for that would have been so nice, because then I feel like I would have spoken up more. With Frog Pond Academy, the Stars and Wishes, for example, I feel like I'm able to speak up.
yeah, and I think that's one of the things that's important to talk about is that safety tools aren't like the be all end all. Like you can't just like have a safety tool, you can't just be like, okay, we're using the X card, we're doing stars and wishes, the game is safe now. Um, you know,
True.
it also comes with they're tools, and what you're building is a culture of care at the table where we decide that the people that we are playing with are more important than the game that we or than the story or the game that we are playing. And that example, like there are so many ways that in a table that where everybody was on the same page could have said, hey, these characters are making me a little uncomfortable, or or something. Like there's so many ways to approach that are not, I'm using my GM power to give you a character, like. And so I'm so sorry, like I'm so horrified. I'm so sorry that you had
Was
to
it like at the
to
time
go
I was
through
like, I
that.
was looking at the sheet because two of us had to have characters recreated because our characters died the previous session. I had this great character and she lasted half a session before I had to leave for the night, and somebody else played her for me and she wound up dying.
Oh no.
So, I have never had a DM hand me a sheet, other than, something consensually ahead of time of, hey, I'm
Yeah.
giving everybody a random character. I have never been handed a sheet being told, nope, this is what I want you to play. Not
Yeah.
what I want to play, not something based off something, we've discussed. It's a, no, I'm the GM. I want you to be that.
Yeah, because I mean, if the GM is not having fun, and I think this is something that's important for GMs to know. Not this GM sounds like they suck, but like if you're a GM listening to this in general, like you're a player too. And so like you shouldn't feel like you have to capitulate to every player's desire, if you're not going to have a good time with it. And the safety tools are there for you also to sort of discuss about like how things are going. So yeah, if your players are murder hoboing all of your favorite NPCs and not engaging with the story that you've handcrafted, like the safety tools exist to also for you to be like, hey, I have this thing going that I've worked very hard on. Is there a way we can make it all work? Um, but like I'm not having fun so with what you're doing, so therefore, I'm going to exert the power that I have over you to do something that I don't think that you're not going to have. Like my fun is more important than your fun
Yeah.
is a bad vibe.
Well, and I appreciated when you specified that, like, yeah, the safety tools, they're tools, but they're not the end all and be all. And the idea of like they using them and respecting them means everybody just has that culture of understanding, the general understanding of like, hey, we're here to have fun together and we're going to try to not, our characters are going to get angry and we're not going to get angry at each other. Um, because yeah, you end up in situations that both good and bad that there isn't a specific safety tool for. But having an idea of like, oh, these are things that can help.
Yeah, it
I was
makes conversing with each other easier, I feel like with
yeah.
the tools that we've been using in Frog Pond Academy, it is easier for me to approach a Fector, for example, and be like, hey, this is what I want to do with a Lorelei. Or, hey, this part with Doriana hits a little too hard. It's too similar to Big Bad Barb. But when Doriana does embody Big Bad Barb, which is my mom, it does make the game a bit more intense and in some ways very fun.
Mhm.
But it does make me more comfortable as a player to say to my DM, "Hey, could we try this? Could I do this?
Yeah. And when
Could
you were
I
talking,
become a piss bender?" I if I
I don't
could
know
tell
what that
you.
is, but now I need to know. It's like,
I mean, urine is a fairly high percentage water.
Yes.
Exactly.
No, she
I have
oh,
literally
shake
that kind
water.
of
she literally
that
took the
kind of
shape water
bending.
spell at like level 4
Oh.
so she could
Yeah,
yeah. This,
that
yep.
Mm.
makes a lot of sense.
Oh
Well,
yeah, if
Stick
you're
peed on me, so it was my defense to him peeing on me.
And
listen,
if nobody put in their consent checklist, no, like, urine play, you're good.
Mhm. Although that might be one of those moments in where you're in the middle of it and go, I've just
I've
discovered a new
decided,
line.
yes. Yeah.
Nobody's fault. Nobody's fault. I didn't know about that because yeah. Yeah, that's yeah. The stars and wishes thing that you were talking about actually got to me a little bit because like I love that tool conceptually. And in almost all of my games, whether I'm the DM or a player, I've never really been able to make it work the way that I think it's intended to of like, hey, we're going to finish the game and now we're going to sit and have this cool down that this is what we're going to use. And it's but what it allowed and continues to allow, because that is a tool that we've talked about in all these different games that I've played, and because the culture of all of the players at the table is that kind of, we're going to help each other out thing. Okay, the reason that this specific tool doesn't work is because we get to the end of this stream, we get to the end of this game, and folks are busy and it's late and folks got to go. This one's got kids, this one's got a second job, this, whatever the reason. It's really hard once the and especially for a bunch of the stream games that I've done, and where like we all carve out that time, but then it gets to the end and you're like, I can't stick around. And so being able to recognize that like, okay, we can't do a stars and wishes right after the show because real life, and it sucks. But here's the DM, the group DM that we're all in. Here's the group email that people are going to send. Here's the text message that's going to show up in my phone 5 minutes after I log off, being like, hey, just kind of checking in. That scene we did, super intense, really cool. You okay? Like, just that idea of like, this is what I would love to do if we had the time, but we don't. So let's at least grab the spirit of it and do it in the way that we can through all the other means has been really gratifying, especially for those streamed games and where people are busy and we got to run. And yeah, being able to text afterwards and be like, all right, now that I have food and a shower, how you doing?
I mean,
Yeah.
that's something like I'm beginning to like really enjoy having a cooldown after game, because back when I was in college and we would be gaming until 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was working a 6 a.m. barista job back then. There was no time to like discuss after game. Like Effector can tell you, we were packing up like before game was even really over. I can tell you there's a handful of times, or more than a handful of times, where we were doing that, just because of time constraints and stuff like that. So that's one thing as a DM effector is very good at, is carving out the time to have that little bit of cooldown.
Yeah,
I've little
I'm a
sessions afterwards with some folks one-on-one, to be like, hey, like I just wanted to check in, maybe there's something the whole group doesn't want to hear, need to hear. Like I always make myself available when I'm running a group.
And
yeah. Oh,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I was just gonna say I really do, I think, advocate for and it's hard, it's not perfect, but when I facilitate games, I often try to, plan for shorter sessions so that we can have, longer times to do the stars and wishes. And, it doesn't always work. Sometimes scenes go long and all of that kind of stuff. But I do think, like, especially for things that are gonna go intense. I also really hate cliffhangers. I hate when things end on cliffhangers. They make things really, like, hard for me to deal with um in the coming week. And so being able to sort of end a little bit early so that we have a little bit more time off stream or, out game to sit and talk, and we're still, you know we're still valuing everybody's time, is something that I'm not great at, but that I'm trying to get better at building out when I'm facilitating a session, to just sort of say, okay, 20 minutes, we're going to talk about what happens. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a formal stars and wishes. But just something to, in the LARP world, they call it de-rolling. Just to, pull yourself out of the character that you were, and then, like, become yourself again, which can be hard.
And I highly recommend, if you are a player in the group, you can be that person who facilitates the checking in. You don't have to wait for the GM, the DM, the storyteller. You don't have to, they don't have to be the one that is in charge of that. Like,
Yeah.
if you take that off of their plate, they're not therapists, but also feel empowered to do it. If you are a player and that's something that you value, yeah, go ahead. And also it means that the person running the story gets the check-in, because all too often you
Check in on your DMs. Oh my God.
check in on them, especially after a tough, an emotional episode or a really
DMs,
rough.
are you okay?
Yeah.
Just like in general.
Are you okay? Do you need a cookie? Always. And I'll say specifically, check in with them when you feel as a player like I just steamrolled something. Like, because the players can often feel real cool and real, happy and excited about, we got into this fight with this dragon, we thought it was going to be bad, but we, did all the right stuff and everything went our way, and then everything, it was great. And then afterwards you check in and the DM is just like, yay, you all had fun, and doesn't say anything. And then you realize later, like, oh, they were kind of hoping for this to be a little bit more epic, or they were kind of looking forward to getting a chance to use this dragon in this cool way before it got slaughtered. Something even as innocuous as that. So absolutely, if you are a player, you don't have to wait for the person in charge of the game to also be in charge of everybody's mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because talking about that makes me think, oh, I don't really check in that well with either of my DMs outside of game. I mean, Mr. Smith, the one in my other campaign, he's pretty vocal after we're ending. He's like, well, I had this plan for you guys, but you guys went right around that. And he's like, you focused on this, but I'm here for it. And Effector, I think Effector is someone I probably need to check, because they'll be like, can I do this? Can I do this? And back when we used to game at his house every Friday, I'm pretty sure that there were there were some things our group did, like with the Arakoras and
Oh,
everything, if
not
I
the
recall.
Arakoras. Oh no. That
Where I
was an
think might
interesting
have been
experience.
a bit mentally taxing on him and like looking at it years later, because this was like 4 years ago now, pre-pandemic, and it's like, oh wow, we really effed with him on this, didn't we?
And you don't have to feel bad about that realization, because the culture of TTRPGs in general and D&D in specific is kind of, even putting aside the adversarial DM, the idea of the DM as the facilitator, the leader, the person who is in charge of making the game happen. We already know the DM is often the person buying the books, making the schedule, coming up with everything. And so the kind of the assumption becomes they're the ones that do the check-in. But yeah, check in with your storytellers, especially if they've got to play a really slimy, awful character. If they've got to be
Yeah.
someone, if they've given you a
Ooh,
really
yeah, there's some
awesome person to
really
hate, remember that they had to play that person
That's
for,
really hard.
and they had
It's
to play
very
that
hard.
person at people that they are friends with, and
Yeah.
that sucks.
Yeah. And I've definitely like had that experience where, you know, I was like multiple people's terrible parents, and I was saying really awful things, and I was doing awful stuff. And then at the end of the game, or the end of the session, people were like, "You were so great. I was so afraid of you. I was so mad at you. You were so great. I loved it." And I was like,
Is that good or
I'm glad.
bad?
Like, I'm glad, but like I also need you to tell me that you still like me and that we're still friends. Like, I'm glad I did a good job. But another thing I want to add about, checking in on your DMs and checking in on your storytellers is also check in on each other. And if you are a person who is good at picking up like nonverbal cues around other people, um maybe just do a check-in, to see if other people are feeling, comfortable or uncomfortable, or if you're not sure, you know call for a break, check in on a 101, send a text message, all of these sort of things, just to sort of, yeah, share the load. I think we put a lot on our GMs, um that, especially if they're like GMing like a trad game where they have to like have a million other things in their head, like, you know we can share the load for this. But also sometimes the problem may be with the GM, or there may be discomfort with the GM. And so having a little bit of there's a tool in the safety toolkit where it talks about the buddy system of like, having a buddy at the table that you can sort of like get in, that you can know that maybe if you don't want to bring something up, they're feel a little more comfortable bringing it up for you. All of that kind of stuff. Just love each other. Just love your friends. Just care for them.
Yep.
And
And also,
yeah.
go ahead. Sorry.
No.
I'll speak from experience of if you check in with someone because maybe it was an intense scene, or maybe you thought you read something that like, oh, are they worried about this? And they're absolutely fine and everything's great. It's not like you've done anything wrong. You check in with somebody and be like, hey, I just want to make sure you're okay. That's always going to go well. Because no one is ever upset that you've checked in on them, people have checked in on me and been like, are you okay? You seemed really upset. And I'm perfectly fine. And then it makes me feel good, not just because, oh, my friend cares, but hey, maybe my acting was real good that session. That was all right. Okay, cool. So yeah, don't ever feel like, oh, if I misread this is going to be bad. Caring about someone is never bad.
Along those lines, I think something really important is that, because like I like I mentioned, do play in a group of people where we're all trying to be funny and have fun. And because of that, I think it's so easy to get lost in, yay, everyone had such a great time tonight. We all loved it and everyone was laughing and it was so much fun. Nothing could possibly be wrong and everyone's totally like perfectly fine. Moving on. And it's so important to like look at situations and be like, hey, yeah, we did have fun, but you know what? We also were still doing something that takes stuff out of us, and like it takes there's a very specific type of energy needed to play these games at all, and just that alone can be not necessarily harmful to your like health, mental health, or like of any kind, but not necessarily helping. And it's just really easy to forget that even though it is fun, it's also real.
And being funny is hard. Being funny is stressful and hard and just as
especially when it's a table of
panic-inducing.
people all trying to be funnier than the other ones.
Oh no.
Yeah. And then the DM just wants to murder all of you because you've moved 4 feet in the last 2 hours.
Mhm.
And forgive me for if I got the neuroscience wrong here, but I'm fairly certain that they have done studies where like the emotions you experience when you're acting and the physical like physicality, like your brain doesn't necessarily know the difference, you know,
Yep.
between what you're doing, like what is real and what is not real, especially when it comes to like the physical effect, like the physical effects of stress, you know. And so it is really important to like, yeah, is that even if you're having fun, you're still feeling, you know, the tear. There's no such thing as real, like if you're fake crying, you're still actually crying and you're still gonna feel the effects of crying after
The motivation's just a little different.
Yeah.
That's why people say, you know, if you're sad, just try smiling and laughing, and your body's like, oh, why do I feel better?
Or the thing that they did about like the putting the pencil like under your nose or between
that's
your
hilarious.
teeth. Yeah, they did like a whole like real scientists did a real scientific study where they had people like hold the pencil like this and then they had to hold them between their teeth, and like the people who held it between their nose and their lips left feeling like grumpy, like they had wasted a whole bunch of time, and the people who held it in between their teeth thought it was really funny and like had a much happier outlook because they were like smiling as opposed to frowning.
Yeah, there's for sure research that how smiling has a big impact on your mood. It's real
Oh
science.
yeah.
That's it's wonderful science.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why when people talk about an experience they had in a game as like this is what happened 5 minutes ago, 5 years ago, whatever, they mostly talk about it in first person. Hey, I remember this time that I killed this dragon. I remember this time I was with this group of people, we were playing a game and we got into a scuffle and we did a thing. It's because your brain forms those memories as though you were actually doing the thing. And so it becomes a natural, no one ever really questions when it's like, oh yeah, so we were playing this game the other day and I picked up this shovel and this and you're saying I, and it's because it was you. You might have been playing a character, but it was you.
For anyone like me whose brain didn't quite get the wording there, this was as opposed to saying my character did this.
Thank you. That's
No, it took me way too long. I was like, what else would we say other than I? Like we?
Yeah.
And that's actually oh, sorry.
I was just saying thank you for bringing that up because I should have given that comparison because that's what happens.
That's actually the reverse is a very good tip for mitigating bleed. Sometimes is that if things are feeling really close, and you usually narrate in first person, you know, then just switching to narrating in third person can be really helpful, because just that little bit of verbal distance. So if you know, say like I look into your eyes and say, and hold your hands, and I say, I love you. That's,
Don't ask.
it's okay. I'm sorry.
Trauma response.
That is a very intimate moment, and it could be, you're just role playing, but it could be very uncomfortable, or you may not want to go there in yourself. So saying, Stardust looks into Moonshine's eyes and holds their hands and says, I love you. Then you're, just that, all of a sudden, you don't have the like, oh, I don't know how I feel about this. Like, oh, this is weird to me. Just that little bit of distance can be helpful.
So, in the spirit of Lauren, what you said, creating a culture of caring at your table, which is the purpose here of implementing these kinds of tools. Is there a tool that anyone in the group particularly enjoys that we haven't brought up so far in our discussion? And it doesn't have to be an official safety tool. It can be just something that you've created as a practice when you're playing or facilitating, something that you find really helpful.
I've got a Google spreadsheet that was given to me by a good friend several years ago, because I was looking for a way to do the whole session zero, at least a basic safety lines and veils for one shots in where you're not necessarily going to be able to get together with those people ahead of time. Everything is going to be kind of over emails or over whatever, and then we're going to go ahead and play. And the spreadsheet, basically what you do is you just copy it for every group that you have, and then you send it to the group, and it's basically a list of, here's a whole bunch of content. Tell me, on this scale of absolutely everything is okay, let's be a little careful of this, no, I don't want this at all, where you fall on these. And if there's anything that's missing, you can go ahead and write at the bottom. And what's amazing about it, which I wish I'd even thought about this ahead of time until I saw this spreadsheet, because it's a Google spreadsheet, it's anonymous. All you're doing is putting X's in things. All you're doing is writing things. You don't put your name anywhere, because a lot of the time people were filling out forms and then the DM was getting that all and having to collate. But because the spreadsheet, everybody's actions on it are anonymous, including the DMs, it becomes a resource that everyone can access, that it's almost like a living document in a way.
Yeah.
And so what was great about it was not just, okay, here's a really easy way to get these lines and veils before this one shot and where we're not going to be able to talk to each other. It also means everybody could go look at it and not feel like they're stepping on other people's toes, because they don't know, so and so is afraid of spiders. They just know, oh, somebody put down no spiders, so my druid isn't going to turn into a spider. And it's something that then, if you're doing a stream and you've got a producer, you can give to the producer and they can put in that. And so, like, the idea of being able to get at least that basic information in a way that everyone can access without anyone feeling like they need to say anything personal about anything is something that I really enjoy. And I think there's a bunch of them floating out there now. But yeah, just putting together a Google spreadsheet, and I just have the blank one with just the basics and no X's. And every time I'm going to run a game, I just copy it and it just goes out to just those people, and then I delete it once it's done, and it's so good.
I love that.
That's similar
There's
to
a-
like the survey that Effector gave us before we started Frog Pound Academy, but I'm not sure how anonymous
Right from the
it is.
safety toolkit.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's a version of the it's not quite the same as the Monty Cook consent checklist, but it is
Yeah.
a version of the consent checklist that I made in Google Forms because I don't know, I just hyper fixated one day and was like, I'm gonna do this. And also, if you use online character keepers, Google Sheets is a really good. A lot of them exist in Google Sheets, and it's really easy to just add a lines and veils page to it. But yeah, that is one of the greatest things about online play is that you can make it anonymous in a way that is easy and also like um anonymous like for everybody, also for the DM. Which is great, especially for, stranger games. And if you're playing
Mhm.
with if you're playing with strangers and you don't necessarily want this DM you've just met for the first time to learn, all of your triggers.
And
Absolutely.
it's great not just for one shots, but like longer campaigns because as I ran it was a 12 episode game and we were using the spreadsheet and we had multiple guests coming in and out and we
Mhm.
had a producer and all of it.
Mhm.
So basically I had told everybody as part of our pre-show before we go live, I'm just going to remind everybody to check the Google spreadsheet in case there's been an update. And then I don't have to worry. No one has to come to me and say there's an update. I don't have to constantly be checking it. It just turns into, hey, take the 15 seconds before we go live, pull up the spreadsheet, see if there's anything on there that has changed, add things if you need to. But like, it just became such an easy anonymous resource. So, and yeah,
There's something.
go ahead.
You finish what your sentence? No.
I was just gonna say the Monty Cook checklist is great to pull from
Yeah.
for that list.
Yeah.
I really like the idea of the anonymous like document that, so you don't have to be embarrassed about anything or feel like you're going to be judged or anything. But there's also something to be said about just like being able to play with people where you can just have open conversations and genuinely just go, hey, these are my no's, and everyone's like, yeah, oh, I agree, or whatever. And that kind of game can be so special because you don't have to think about the being judged, the being people thinking you're weird or trying to keep things, anonymous, finding a way to keep things secret or whatever. It's a completely different kind of game that you're playing, like ultimately. Yeah.
Yeah, I have friends that I play with, and when we do lines and veils, we usually like we just like the usual because we're
The
just
usual.
so we're so familiar with what we need, and we also know that we can like bring it up in later on, or if things change or any of that kind of stuff.
And
I
that's
don't have a favorite safety tool because I can't choose.
well, and that's the beauty of your toolkit is like it is a toolkit and some games some of those are going to work better than others. And
Yep.
sometimes, one shots are you're going to use this set and sometimes for longer campaigns you use this set and sometimes in the middle of a campaign you decide this works for that. They're all good, but they're all, a hammer is no better or worse than a screwdriver, but sometimes you need a hammer and sometimes you need a screwdriver.
I'm like in my brain judging like the pros and cons of hammers versus screwdrivers. And honestly, I think that like hammers are better because you can put a screw in with a hammer, but you can't put a nail in with a screwdriver. This is how my brain works, by the way.
You're not wrong. You're
Yeah,
definitely not
so
wrong.
like scientifically, maybe a hammer
Yeah.
is better.
Until you
Yeah.
want to get that screw out.
No, the hammer, the back of the thing. You just have to dig it into the wall a little bit.
Just means there might be a little bit of damage to
You
it when you
might
try
not
to
get your
it down.
deposit back, but
Why
you
not?
know, were you anyway?
Well, actually,
this
that's
is the version of the safety tool in where someone in the middle of the game hit something that was a line that they didn't know that they had, and so
Yeah.
now the hammer needs to be used for the screwdriver.
Smack.
yeah. Actually, this hammer screwdriver thing is something that I use in my education work to talk about. Sometimes safety tools don't work for people. A really famous example is like the X card versus the Lexton technique. And so basically, the X card is sometimes doesn't work for people who have very strong trauma reactions because, in fact, pretending something never happened can make it worse.
Mm.
And so this is the Lexton technique. It's an essay by a writer and game designer named PH Lee, who was talking about an experience that they had at with a GM at a convention, where if something happened, instead of pretending it never happened, like if a trigger was hit, instead of pretending never happened, they stop, they figure out what the triggered person needs to happen next, and they get that control to sort of they get the narrative control to say what is going to happen next, so that they feel good about all of that. And I think, yeah, it's a really good example of like, sometimes a tool isn't going to work for people. So that's why, like you can't just say, "Oh, we're going to use the X card." Um because maybe the X card doesn't work for somebody. So I really encourage people to, to actually talk about the sort of safety tools that they're comfortable using. There are some safety tools I don't feel comfortable using at tables, and some safety tools I know other people feel that don't feel comfortable using. And so if you are starting a game, I really recommend that you approach safety tool choice as a discussion, and you say, like if you're a GM or a facilitator, these are the tools I would like to use.
Can we
Is
make
that
an
okay with-
anonymous Google Doc about what tools you want to use or not?
Is that okay, or is there something that we need to add? Because yeah, I mean, you can open a box with a hammer, but if you open the box with the screwdriver, then maybe the box will be more intact,
I mean, it depends on the kind of box, and that's the whole point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it's a shoebox, you're taking it a little too far, and you should just fucking open it with your hands.
Just use your fingers.
It's not that hard.
So I want to be respectful of our guest times. We've been together for a couple of hours. So if there's any other last minute, like I got to get it out there, I got to share this, please let me know. Otherwise, maybe we can move towards wrapping our stream up. So yeah, thank
Can I
you.
just say
guys.
one little note?
Go ahead.
Because I jotted it down at work today. Just something that I think a lot of people don't consider, like, because we have been talking about safety tool and a safety tool kit being relatively new in its like defined sense versus like a loose, hey, whatever, we might have some things we should do. That it's so different for playing a game with your friends at home and actual play, because the biggest thing that I think people don't consider when putting it into effect for actual play is that content going online is going to be online forever. And what you are agreeing to now is not going to be, it's not going to be like the be all end all for this, because you're going to see that video on YouTube in 10 years and you're going to go, shit. So I just feel that something like the fact that it's not just a memory that we all have of sitting around a table, but I can literally go view what we did, is something that really needs to be considered when looking into toolkit and tools that you're going to use for actual play.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
100%
absolutely.
agree. And like the difference in actual play versus home play is its own discussion that I think we could all talk about for another 2 hours. But yeah, it's an incredibly good point, because sometimes the internet is ephemeral and sometimes it's not.
Sometimes it's not as ephemeral as we'd like. Yeah.
And sometimes you're on the morning news the next day and you don't know why.
Oh no. Oh no.
Maddie, is that a personal experience?
I don't know what you're
had?
talking about.
I don't.
Excuse me, I checked on the safety consent list that I don't want to talk about this.
Fade to
I'll
black.
say, we're done.
Yeah.
We're done. I'll give a positive example of that. I was playing a game online that was a long-running campaign with very good friends that I was playing in. and it was a longer game. Like we were playing for several hours, and it was weekly and so much fun and everything. But it was definitely a game that had darker undertones. There were serious things going on. Everybody had lines and veils. Everybody was checking in. It was great. We hit during the game something that I had never put on my lines and veils. I had never thought was an issue. And then as soon as and we didn't even it didn't even really happen in the game. It was the moment of, oh crap, this might be happening.
What
And
was it? I have to know.
In roundabout ways, a character was depressed, and there was a non-zero chance that they were going to take that to an unfortunate conclusion. And I didn't realize that that was a thing that I absolutely did not want until that moment. Now, we had all the stuff, like in the positive sense, like I went to our backstage chat and was checking in and got the immediate, no, promise that's not going to happen. And so everything's okay. And then we talked about it during the break and like hey, safety tools worked. Yay. It's a little hard for me to go and watch that episode because I can see it on my face and I can remember that moment. And so even though it didn't happen in the game, even though everything was fine, even though it was a fine outcome, and now, hey, I learned something new about myself, that is a show I can't watch. I can't go back and look at.
Yeah, there's definitely, and it's something I've been thinking about a lot since my days in actual play when I was we don't speak of those anymore, but but just that there is, like there's no way to well, there is a way to retcon, but like how do you retcon something when other people, when it's just on the internet for people that you say, oh, that never happened, and then there's evidence that, oh, it did happen? Or how do you deal with it when like you're retconning something and you have a big fan base, and maybe the fan base is like, I don't like that you did that, so I'm gonna pretend that it all, that it happened in all of my fan fiction. And like, how do you deal with just that, you know
I think all GMs need a wizard NPC who does the Men in Black memory eraser.
memory eraser,
Just at their disposal. They just, oh my God, so weird. So these guys in black suits just start walking down the street and they come up to you with this weird device and a light flashes in your face and suddenly it's that morning again. You have no idea.
That would be a nice tool to kind of reset in a way. Depending, like on your campaign and your group, of course.
You could make it make sense somehow. I'm sure.
Recently introduce a time witch to the campaign, so
you did, and I'm gonna fuck her up real good. Pardon my French.
The poor time witch, she did nothing.
Well, and just like how the toolkit, there's a whole bunch of tools because not everyone is good for every group or every situation. Not every group will want to deal with that situation in the same way. A lighthearted group versus a serious group might deal with it. It might be easier for the lighthearted group to just be like, didn't happen, let's just rewind that. While the serious group may need to take a little bit more time and deal with it. It might be something, like Lauren was talking about just some players need to handle things in certain ways. So yeah,
to turn it into like a full journey that the story goes like to heal from this thing that accidentally came up.
Yep.
I think ever since being introduced to safety tools through Frog Pond Academy, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to participate in another game without those, because like I said, that lovely DM who told me what character to play, they're wanting to start another campaign, and like I can't do that without boundaries. I can't do that without some kind of safety net to know, okay, my triggers aren't going to get touched, because this person was the kind of person that likes to push the envelope effector. I don't know how much you would want me to elaborate on that, or if you want to weigh in on that person at all, because
we already hate them. It doesn't matter.
Decide.
Yeah.
But I think even if I DM again, I'm gonna have some kind of safety boundary tool in place, so I as a DM know how far I can go and what my players are expecting and what.
You should run a campaign where everybody is a mute monk. It's a good idea.
It is a good idea. It is.
Because like I'm a very chatty person and sitting there with this character not knowing how I'm going to speak. And of course I'm lawful good or whatever. And I'm
So
like,
you're not gonna do anything bad. Just
I'm chaotic neutral like most of the time. And I'm like,
And the extra sad thing is that's not necessarily a bad character. Like if
You
you
can
sign
make
up
it.
for that,
if
yeah,
you wrote that as a character, that'd be dope.
yeah, if all the players were on board, like
Yeah.
there are plenty of ways to make that not only work but be super cool and evocative and everything, but to be thrown that
As an
is
insult.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
But as a compliment, Emmy, your ability to throw in catchwords, mwah. What I've learned from using the safety toolkit in Frog Pond Academy, I'm just like, okay, are you like consider commercial work? I think you'd be perfect. without skipping a beat. Every single, just love it.
Funny.
thank you.
Agreed.
All right.
This message has been brought to you by a Factor of Change in the Frog Pond Academy.
This is true.
See?
Live every
Fired.
Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
It's facts. Facts.
It
All
gets
right.
better.
He's made me do the Final Fantasy 14 copy pasta enough times. I've got
It is
commercial
true.
voice down.
Not even sponsored.
skill
I
to
just
have.
love it.
Listen,
off
as someone
book.
who has to do a modicum of voiceover and voice acting, it's a really good skill to have.
All right, let's go around the room then. Thank you everybody for joining and having this conversation with me. I feel like I learned a lot. I hope you all are taking something away. Hi, Kitty. Hello.
Baby!
Yeah,
wanna
thank
wake
you
up late.
for just having your cat. I've noticed it every time, and
Oh.
I've been delighted.
You know, he this is Rizzo for anyone who doesn't know Rizzo. Oh, there's kitty.
This is Link.
Oh, look at them both.
Oh, hi,
I
buddy.
just woke him up, so he's still sleeping.
My other one is hiding behind my accordion on my bed.
This is the safety tool that everybody always loves. It is
Kitties.
post chat pet.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cat, dog, bird, bring
It's
them all
the
on.
kitties.
I always want to see your pet on stream.
This one just curls up and he
Oh.
likes booty pats for whatever reason.
I
I don't
mean-
get it.
Same. Yeah, so let's go around the room and let us know where we can find you and the work that you're doing. We'll start at the top with Emmy.
So you can find me live here on Twitch 4 to 5 days a week, sometimes on a Factors channel, sometimes on my own. Sometimes Link even comes on. There is Cat Tax where you can redeem I Bring Link or his sister Zelda live on stream. They get snuggles and they get pet pets. I'm here, I stream JRPGs and spoopy games, and overall, as I say it, whatever the hell I want, I embrace my chaos, and that's what Twitch has taught me to do. Sometimes you'll see me on, modding for a Factor or Plunge 87 or Squid Monarchy, and then a lot of the time you see me telling people to follow Obsessive Repulsive because that man deserves follows. Please consider supporting him today. I do go live on TikTok from time to time, not often though, just because TikTok is a little
Different.
it's a little unhinged over there still.
Mm,
I feel
Their
safer here.
moderation system is special.
Yeah. But yeah, that's where you can find me most days of the week. I can't think of anything else you want me to add there.
That sounds
I like
good,
to
yeah.
play games and I like to make friends, and that's why I came to Twitch. Linky, what about you?
Moving over to Obalauren. Where can we
First
find
off,
you?
thanks for having me on. This was super fun. Y'all were amazing to chat with, and it was great to chat with you. And I'm Lauren Urban. You can find me. Go to my website, lauren-urban.com. It's kind of the easiest way, and that way, if I'm on a social, I've got it linked right on the front page. If I'm excited about a thing, it's right on the front page. I'm mostly Twitter and Blue Sky. The other place you can find me is over at Idle Champions of the Forgotten Realms, where I make pretty much all of the content that you can see and or hear and or read. So if you see a video or read a blog or come to the Twitch channel, part of that I have done. And so yeah, come on by and tell me if you like things, because just like players and GMs, anyone who creates things really wants that kind of feedback all the time. But yeah, this has been a lot of fun, and I look forward to everybody having a much safer time at their tables.
And Lauren?
Yeah, my name's Lauren Bryant Monk. I'm the co-curator of the TTRPG Safety Toolkit. I also work as a safety tool writer and safety consultant and game designer. You can find my games on itch.io or starvingsoubrette.itch.io. And you can find all of the information about the work that I do on my website, starvingsoubrette.com. Yeah. I'm gonna I'm gonna shout out the games that I have recently written for, which are Starforged and Die. Kiana and I both wrote or worked together to write the safety tools for both of those games, and I'm very proud of the work we did. They're really good, so definitely check those games out.
And Maddie?
I'm Maddie, and minimalgameplay.com. Anything you can think of, I've dabbled in it at some venture. Most importantly, obviously, please check out my dating sim game on itch.io. It is if you watch the Bachelorette season with Gabby and Rachel as the Bachelorettes, and you were upset that they didn't end up together. Don't worry about it, because you can just go play my dating sim and they end up together in 4 different ways. Choices matter. So, and you can find me on my own stream more often than anywhere else. And then Perception Studio. And if you like puppeteering, which if you don't know if you like puppeteering, figure that out for your own consent and stuff checklist, because some people really don't, I've learned. But puppets, they're funny.
It's always a good time at Perception Studio. It is.
Thank you for having us.
You're
Effector.
welcome. Yeah, thank you for
Thank
hosting
you
this
so
and
much.
opening up this for discussion. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, this was a good
Thank you
time.
all.
All right, y'all. Thank you
Hi,
for
Link.
joining. If I roll
Thank you.
resilience, we'll see you next month. Probably live at PAX, because we're going to be in Boston. So
Fun.
That's right.
that'll be fun.
PAX is next month.
That's right. Bye, y'all.
Bye. Link, say bye. Say bye.
Thank you all for joining for another episode of Roll for Resilience. As I like to say, with the right conditions, every single human being has the ability to heal, and you have the power to create those conditions. Again, I'm Effector of Change. You can find me streaming on Twitch at twitch.tv/Effector of Change. We live record episodes of the Frog Pond Academy, our actual play 5e campaign, every Wednesday at 8:30 Eastern on the Twitch channel. If you'd like to support my work, you can donate to my Ko-Fi at ko-fi.com/Effector of Change.